The year is 2003. The walking hazard known as Ricardo Mayorga is on a magnificent high after having recently secured the WBA welterweight title from a brutal TKO against the undefeated champion Andrew Lewis. Wanting to keep the momentum going and his fear among the division intact, Mayorga calls out the WBC and Ring Magazine welterweight champion Vernon Forest, another undefeated warrior coming off of back-to-back wins against future Hall of Famer Sugar Shane Mosley in the prime of his career. Can the Viper Vernon Forest's venom subdue El Matador, or will the killer Ricardo Mayorga channel his inner thug and stare down the barrel of a gun for the third time of his life, outsmarting death as if it's his day job? Welcome back to Boxing After Dark, where today we will be looking at a fight hailed by many to be one of the most entertaining, adrenaline-filled fights of the early 2000s. With a man like Ricardo Mayorga, the question always begins with where to start. His early days in Nicaragua, living on the floor with 4 brothers and his mother in one room. His early teenage years as a drag racer, punishing 40-year-old truck drivers and risking his life for $1.50 a week. Or how about where most people begin, when Mayorga was a man of the streets? It was common to hear about him getting into altercations with his relatively unknown gang in the streets of Nicaragua, but Mayorga gained most of his notoriety for his share of times where he almost literally bit the bullet, having been shot twice early on in his life due to his quick temper and shady people he would associate himself with. His family and Mayorga himself assumed there must be a reason he was still alive after the multiple dances he'd attended with the devil, and perhaps they were right.
Bueno, cuando era más joven, peleaba barrio contra barrio y éramos como 40 contra 40 peleando. Y así ahí salían puñales, machetes, piedras.
Despite his lack of professionalism outside of the ring and his mysterious background that gets more and more puzzling each time you read about it, it was impossible to presume the direction his future would take him. Yet everything changed when he came under the wing of the legendary boxing promoter Don King, after a dazzling display and knockout against Adolfo Salazar. And here is where we see why Ring Magazine describes Mayorga to be the so-called craziest man in the sport, which I'm sure if you know anything about Mayorga, it wouldn't take more than 5 seconds to guess. Yes, his infamously problematic trash talk. From his taunting of his opponent's skills, to his lack of respect and decency to the problems they faced and their personal battles, Mayorga thrived off of the mental games before his bouts began. This led to many boxing fanatics being disgusted by him, whilst others would be enthralled as to what he could possibly say and do next. After getting his rematch with Andrew Lewis, Mayorga annihilated him in the 5th round with a technical knockout, smashing him to the canvas 3 times in the final 3 minutes of the bout. And now comes his moment to shine once again, in his first title defense as a welterweight champion, with a chance for 2 shiny new belts from the WBC and Ring Magazine. Vernon Forest, despite not having as much of a story to tell as Ricardo, was a monster in his own right, climbing the ranks slowly over time, effectively with much promise. Vernon was now at an all-time high in his career after defeating the undefeated future legend Shane Mosley in back-to-back efforts comfortably, and Ricardo, despite having a threatening presence, was seen as a one-trick pony as far as fighting skills go, relying on aggression and his punching power to win in fights, although even his biggest haters could commend his more than impressive gas tank, able to comfortably go 12 rounds despite his diet mainly consisting of cigarettes and alcohol. Vernon, although not a legend by any means at the time, was someone that was hard not to like, which was most apparent during the build-up to this fight.
In most instances, a fighter has a single focus, to be world champion. But Vernon Forest has a second major endeavor called Destiny's Child.
Destiny's Child Incorporated is a therapeutic group. We house people with mental disabilities.
Destiny's Child was begun by Forrest and his partners in 1997, after they had volunteered at another similar agency.
I said, I think y'all can do better than what y'all doing. And they said, well, if you think you can do better, then do it yourself. And that's what I did.
The fight arrived on January 23rd of 2003. Many prayed for the comeuppance of Mayorga, others the victory of Forrest due to his friendly personality, whilst the majority just wanted a thrill ride of a fight, something that Mayorga could always deliver, and something Forrest fans had began to expect after his last 2 sublime bouts.
Vernon Forest was involved in 2 fights with Shane Mosley, both of which involved a fair amount of clinching, holding, and there were disputes on both sides as to which fighter it was who was responsible for all that. Kind of thing takes place here, try to blunt his power. With the jab from the bombs.
A little bit.
Mayorga forced to fight a boxing match for the first minute and a half of the fight to touch Vernon Forest,
which we didn't see Campbell.
Right. Fact that so few have
6-1 men to
more logical than 10.
That was a good left hook by Mayorga.
Yep, it caught Forrest. And down goes Forrest. Marty Denkin.
I think that was a correct call by Marty Denkin.
Forrest doesn't think so. Forrest thinks he was thrown down, apparently.
Round 1 opens and fireworks explode from the first bell. Forrest shows his preferred style of boxing, putting his reach to his advantage and landing magnificent jabs whilst keeping the bulldog that is Mayorga at bay. But just as it seems Forrest has got Ricardo where he wants him, a sublime left hook is landed in the final 10 seconds of the round. Mayorga takes advantage of his sudden advantage, knocking Vernon off balance and sending him to the ground for the first time in his career.
And it cost Forrest a round which he had won up to that moment. CompuBox numbers in the round: Forrest 15 out of 51, Mayorga 7 out of 48, but Mayorga gets the round because of the knockdown. Now Forrest comes back with his left hook, and Mayorga trades punches with him, and they're going to have a war. When you back up against a guy like Mayorga, what's the danger?
It's a different...
Great uppercut by Forrest, and a left hook. Mayorga comes back with a right of his own. They trade shots in the center of the ring.
You got to get back out there, and there's that right hand by Forrest.
The jab. Mayorga, prompt biggest urge is to fire bombs upstairs. Another great uppercut by Forrest, and he landed a right hand. Mayorga says, come on, bring me more. Forrest begins to paint him with the jab. And that knockdown at the end of round 1 was enough to bring out the Tiger in the champion.
Mayorga.
Right uppercut by Forrest. Great left hook by Forrest. Mayorga just takes the combination and says, hit me more.
This is like a street fight in which one fighter has skills and the other fighter's just wading in, and the guy with skills is trying to figure out how do you fight this guy.
So Vernon wins the second round to level the scales a little bit after a 10-8 round for Mayorga in the first. Hard right hand by Mayorga. And another hard right hand hurts Forrest. Deal between Vernon Forest and HBO.
Get ordinarily. Whoa!
What an uppercut.
Yeah.
Mayorga says, I've got an uppercut too.
In with his uppercut.
Another big right hand from Mayorga. Body shot by Forrest. Right hand by Mayorga. Hits him right in the chops. Big right hand by Mayorga.
Forrest put in a good left hook a moment ago, and that hurt.
Vernon wobbling on his feet as he threw the right hand. He goes down in the face of a crutching right cross.
And that time he was seriously hurt.
Yeah, look at the wobbling in Vernon Forest. Marty Denkin stops the fight. Marty Denkin stopped the fight, and Ricardo Mayorga has done it.
Let's see Vernon Forest come into the ring rapping the next time.
He stood and waved his finger back and forth in front of Vernon's face, looking at Forrest's eyes to see if they followed. And hey, I think it's a good stoppage. Forrest's legs were gone.
Mayorga is the new WBC welterweight champion of the world. After a huge shock to the nervous system of the crowd and boxing world as a whole, Mayorga celebrates his victory whilst getting Larry Merchant to light him a cigarette for his post-fight interview. Mayorga's thuggish yet captivating personality leads to not just a famous upset, but a great one that many have come to recognize as a fight of hunger rather than a fight of talent. Ricardo came to prove himself on a night that many people didn't even know him, let alone expect him to come out of victorious, and for that alone he earned the respect of many. Sadly, although many respected Mayorga in this moment and in his shockingly strong rematch with Forrest just 6 months later in which he'd win by unanimous decision, the boxing world's perception eventually soured on him due to his antics and need to say controversial things in order for a couple extra pay-per-view sales. Many found him to be insufferable as a champion and prayed for his downfall, which luckily would come by the hands of Corey Spinks, an opponent who, as previously mentioned, had to deal with the brunt of many needlessly horrible remarks by El Matador. Fighting all the way until 2019, many of the current boxing community see him as a wasted talent. Someone who could have gone 12 rounds with the power to defeat anyone who stepped in his way, but gave in to his public persona, thinking he had to be a clown show for the fans, and going in the ring for a payday, losing unnecessary rounds and fights as a whole due to his incessant taunting and childishness. Vernon Forest became far less active after his first 2 losses to Mayorga, fighting once a year at best but bagging some respectable wins against Sergio Mora and Ike Corte, one of which Forrest bested for the WBC light middleweight title, and the other being a former welterweight champion. Sadly, Forrest, although a loved fighter for his charming personality and respectable resume, passed away in the midst of his career after being set up in a robbery at a gas station, getting shot whilst trying to defend his 10-year-old godson from harm attempting to scare away the perpetrators. Forrest was famous for his abundance of charity work and is still loved and missed by the boxing community to this day. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more from Boxing After Dark, feel free to subscribe to the channel and don't be afraid to drop a like and comment. Thank you for watching.